Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Cyndi Michielle. She's a PhD, is a professional clairvoyant and energy healing healer whose explicit goal is to reconnect her clients to their own information. She strongly believes that everyone has their own answers. We are just nearly neutral enough to find them. So we'll find all these answers from her. Welcome to the show, Cyndi.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so excited to chat about energy and clairvoyance and all the ways in which it shapes our world every single day.
Absolutely, absolutely. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Cyndi. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk about. As you said, we'll talk about energy. We'll talk about the world of energy healing and clairvoyance, the power of energy in everyday life. So before we come to that, let's understand about you, a bit more about you, about your background, about your journey, so that the audience knows who they are listening to.
Thank you. I will try to be brief. I tend to go down 16 different rabbit holes at any given moment. So I have my PhD in childhood studies with a focus on kids media and play. And in my training, my academic training, I studied ethnography, which is the study of culture, qualitative research, which is how do you ask good questions, how do you elicit information from people through interviews, and then also participant observation. And prior to my graduate studies, I had started an intuitive training program where I was being taught how to read energy, how to become clairvoyant. And these two things kind of naturally married themselves because I was being taught the energy from one perspective of how to be observant, how to make connections, see patterns. And then formally in my education, I was being taught like the theory and the actual practices and what this looks like in everyday life. And they kind of married each other right around the beginning of the pandemic. As I think for many people, like the pandemic was like their opportunity to pursue something they weren't sure what they were going to do. And essentially what I do with my clients is I'm looking at them as the spirit. I'm looking at how they interact with the world. I'm looking at what their challenges are. I feel very strongly that we all have our own answers. We're just so not remotely neutral to the chatter of the world or our own experiences. And so when I'm working with clients, I'm helping put language to things they already know. And then in other areas of my life, whether it's academic consulting and editing or working with kids and families, I'm also looking at the world around them, how it shapes who they are, how they're being influenced by some of these unseen influences or impacts in our world, and really helping people understand that energy is just another sense that we have. We just aren't taught how to use it as much anymore. And it's a lot of fun because I get to see patterns other people don't see, or I notice things that other people aren't picking up on. But I think the most fun for me is just putting language to things people already know, but they can't quite find the language for.
Absolutely, absolutely, Cyndi. So let's understand energy. Everyone knows about energy, good energy, bad energy, whatever energy it is, and you see they know that the energy we are all. They have read in physics also, whether they forget or whether they remember whatever it is, and most of the people remember about just this thing. We are all, energy is neither created nor destroyed. It can transform from one form to another. What is your perception or understanding of this energy that shapes our life? How should people understand your understanding of this word called energy, or this whole existence called energy?
I think I would add in the word consciousness. So when I'm talking about energy, I'm talking about energy that has a level of awareness, of consciousness, whether that's a spirit from somebody that's passed or a spirit guide. When I talk about energy, I'm talking about the consciousness and how it can interact with the world. And I stand by physics, like it can be neither created nor destroyed. It just transmutes or transforms. And it has, just because we don't see it, like we don't see the wind. This is my example to people all the time. Like we don't see the wind, but we see the impact of the wind. I may not see my spirit guides or the spirit of my father that's passed, but I can definitely feel the influence and the experience and get the signs and all those other things. And so for me, energy is an aspect, has an aspect of consciousness to it so that it can interact. And that aligns pretty deeply with my academic background of like really believing strongly in agency, where every individual on the planet can interact with the world around them, create change, and be changed by them. So both the actual physical aspect, the makeup of energy in a physical body, is very similar to as one that doesn't have a physical body. The biggest difference being it's going to be a lot harder for a spirit to pick up this pen versus me that has dexterity and picking up the pen. So it's kind of the same as physics, but like I add in consciousness because it's got some sort of intent behind it.
Right, right, Siddhi. So, if I understand, we are surrounded by energy,
Yeah.
beings in
Yep.
different forms.
Yep.
It is just that we do not have the right equipment to either, see them, or maybe our eyes are not designed. Maybe some animals, they say they have this extra power, they can see, like horses, like dogs, and
Mm-hmm.
so many of them. Perhaps that's why they can see things much more in their own sense. I want to understand, if these beings are what are they there for? Means they're some of the, if they're ghosts, their job is over in this world. Why are they loitering around in this world and waiting for us to come to them? Is it like that, or and because we don't know our purpose, do they know their purpose? What does your sense tell about this?
Oh my gosh, I feel like that's like such the question that people like to talk about because we don't fully understand. So from where I sit, consciousness was placed on this planet by spirits that didn't have bodies. Maybe they were from this universe, maybe they were from a different universe, but consciousness was intentionally placed on this planet from where I sit. And it was placed on this planet so that it could be embodied and it could take on its next step. And so to me, being in a physical body is actually top tier. That's what we're all working for. When we're in a physical body, we can create karma with other people where karma is neither good nor bad. It's neutral. From where I sit, it's energy that's been left somewhere and it's you get to go back and kind of reclaim it. In terms of whether we see it or not, because there's so many things you just asked that I just want to like comment on. First and foremost, we know that there's a lot of things in our visual field our brain automatically filters out because it's too much information. So from where I sit, most people have a filter that doesn't let them see what's intangible. And part of an intuitive training program would be to turn that muscle back on and say, hey, you actually can see something that's not tangibly there. You just kind of need practice. And it's very similar to imagination. And I've met people with a variety of neurodivergent diagnoses that had to learn how to add that filter in so that they didn't see everything that was around them. And I think that's a lot of what happens when we're super young. We're taught not to notice things that the adults around us don't notice. And you can see this by asking kids about their imaginary friends. Like that's the easiest way to understand what kids see that you don't see. And then coming back around to your question of like, why are they hanging around? So many answers. Okay. So first and foremost, just because somebody has passed or stepped out of the body, it doesn't mean they don't have a connection to the world. My dad passed in 2017. He shows up all the time. He gives signs. He still communicates with me and my siblings. I think he probably communicates with my mom as well, though she's probably not as open to it. So some of it is just they still have a connection to the planet and they want to be of support. Then there's other spirits that are not necessarily connected to you on a physical plane, but maybe you've worked with them in a past life or you've worked with them earlier in this lifetime and they have a vested interest in you and or they want to support you or they want to learn something from you. And these are the spirits that, like when people talk about spirit guides and past loved ones, these are the quote unquote positive ones. And then I strongly believe there's also a lot of energy around us that may not be as high vibrational. It may be perceived as being more negative, evil, demonic, like depending upon who I'm talking to. And those energies, I feel, like to create limits and they like to create power because they feed off the energy of power. So I think there's a whole lot of different echelons to spirits and why they interact with us. But ultimately, for me in my world, I look at it almost always from a karmic lens of like, what is my relationship with this spirit? what do they want from me and what do I want from them? And it's very much a two-way street. And sometimes it's just as simple as, I wanted you to recognize that I was a spirit and say hello to me as a spirit, and they're gone. And other times it's like, I want to be your guide and I want to help you find that next job or find that next partner or that next home. So it's a wide range, I think. And we interact with them in different ways and they interact with us in different ways. And I recently had a conversation with someone where they were like, I really want a paranormal experience, but I feel like I want it too much. And I'm like, you're having them all the time. You're just not identifying them as such. So I think we interact and we just don't realize it a lot.
Absolutely. We interact with them, but we don't realize them. But I want to understand where they say you don't carry anything with you when you step onto the next world. Do we don't carry any belongings? Do we carry
Sure.
all the education?
Yes.
Education, when maybe if you are a PhD, will you carry this PhD knowledge onto the? Do people take it to the other world? Because I
Yes.
want to understand that communication. How is this communication happening? What language is this happening? What feelings? Because a
Yeah.
person who is coming from a different background, their feelings will be different. Somebody who is much more educated, say somebody Elon Musk, if he crosses to another world, his understanding will be different. If he comes to me, will I understand what he wants to say? So I want to understand, this concept of how do you then, interact with them? Can common people interact with those people, or is it the lack of understanding of this, the language, the feelings, or anything that you want to say with the people who have crossed over?
So I think there's two answers to this. The first being, a lot of the communication in the modality I was taught, which is of the legacy of the Berkeley Psychic Institute, if anybody listening is familiar with the Berkeley Psychic Institute, it's in pictures. We're taught to read with pictures. It starts as a color. For me, it almost always unravels into either a short video or a series of pictures, and I make sense of it. So the communication language for me is pictures. Now, I have some colleagues who cannot see a purple apple in their mind's eye, for example. And they rely a little bit more on what we might call knowingness, or simply like having a trust that the information they're receiving is real. And through repetition and working with other people, you kind of grow that muscle and you have more trust in yourself. And so a lot of it for me specifically is visual. I have several colleagues and even clients where it's more auditory. They hear spirit, they hear things, and sometimes it's a ring in their ear. Sometimes they actually hear words, which personally freaks me out and not my favorite. And I don't like when it happens. I think for a lot of people, because it's not taught, they don't necessarily know how to kind of develop that muscle. The other way that communication happens, whether we're using a medium like tarot cards or a pendulum or runes, is through like a secondary tool. And a lot of that I call more signs, where you're like asking for information and you're waiting to receive something. And this is also when you're asking like, should I take this step in that? Should I accept this promotion? If so, I want to see a raven in the next week. And if not, I want to hear this specific song. And so when I'm working with clients and people that are new to communication and spirit, I almost always start with, well, first and foremost, like, how do you want to communicate? I have some clients that love automatic writing. Not my favorite personally. It takes a long time. You have to be in a specific vibration. Doesn't work for me, but it works really well for others. Other clients are like, I have no idea. And I most always start with like a sign. Ask something super silly and say, like, if I'm supposed to get chocolate ice cream tonight, I want to see a really large gray stone. And if I'm supposed to get strawberry ice cream tonight, I want to see a purple frog. And just kind of start there to ask for really silly communication. Because there's no, like, you're not looking for a specific outcome. And if you see that gray rock and you really wanted strawberry ice cream, you're still going to get strawberry ice cream. But in general, the language of spirit for me is visual, or it's like a color. And I think if we lived in a world where we communicated a lot more with like the tones of, say, on a flute or like on a trumpet, I think if we had more communication in our world like that, then my language of communication with spirit would probably be more about auditory. But for me, it's pictures. I close my, well, I don't have to close my eyes anymore, but I was taught, you close your eyes, you look for a color, and you start to communicate with it in your mind's eye. And it's kind of weird. Like it is a little bit left of center and things that we haven't done since we were tiny humans. And yet I have successfully taught people of like 600 plus people in a single room on how to just have a super brief communication with some sort of spirit. Oftentimes I ask them to choose their higher self or like their version of God, but it's an easy thing to learn. It's just not something that we're taught anymore.
Right. And who has more energy? This sort of, outer world energy. You talked about children. Why not young people? And then if children have it, why not older people? Because they are almost seeing the other world. They get those feelings. They get that message. Many people know about that their time has come. Not
Mm-hmm.
because they are feeling less energy, but because they can understand these things better. They can see spirits, see things under. So help us understand then who is the best carrier of such or communicator with such energy.
I don't think it has to do with the age of the body. I think it has to do with the age of the spirit. So to answer your question previously about like what knowledge do we take next, your spirit has its own history, its own knowledge, its own wisdom. A lot of people talk about the Akashic or Akashic records as being like the repository of information. And I align with that. I have my own Akashic records. It holds all the history of my spirit. I think in terms of the chronology of the age, if you have a child that has taken many, many lifetimes and they are an older soul, an older spirit, they're going to have more access and they're going to have more trust to that information, regardless of their age. If you have someone that's really, really chronologically in the last part of their life, but maybe this is the 5th time they've taken a body on this planet, they're probably not going to be as open to the belief that they have past lives or the belief that they have this other information. And vice versa. You could have a child that's a brand new spirit, first time they're taking a body, and you could have an elderly person where maybe this is the last time they take their body. I have many colleagues that are like, I don't ever want to take a body again. I'm like, I get it. Like this lifetime has been kind of rough. Like we've seen a lot of evolution. We've seen a lot of detriment and it's been hard. I totally respect that. And on the flip side, you probably still will take another body. But when you work with kids, especially under the age of 10, imagination is completely acceptable. That is a language that they speak. It's a language that as adults, we agree they're allowed to have. And around 8 to 10, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, the shift in our Western society, I'm in the US, and our Western society is oftentimes much more academic and much more concrete thinking and not as much time for imagination. So I think it stops being fostered and therefore it kind of like falls to the wayside. And if you've ever tried to play as an adult with kids playing dolls or cars or any sort of imaginary play, it's actually really challenging to kind of keep up with them because they're making patterns and connections and there's a whole secondary story going on in their head. And as adults, we don't do that anymore. And so there's something about how I don't know how much is culture versus innate ability and how the body like physically evolves over time or grows or develops, but there's definitely an intersection between how much we value imagination and how much we value this as a skill, as well as what happens in the brain around that age. And then again, later on around 25. And 25 is typically oftentimes somewhere between 22 and 25 is where a lot of young people start to reconsider, if they haven't already, like their religious beliefs or their ideology or their spiritual beliefs. So I think there's something that happens in the brain as well as something that happens in culture.
Right. And why is it that these spirits or energy, they have more hold the power of communication and they only decide whom to contact, when to contact? Is it in dreams? Is it in real life? They will give you message. Why is it that we do not have that power? We only have through some medium like you. I want to understand this is not equal society. Means the spirit should understand that they come from a world where we are talking about equality, but they forget it as soon as they cross over.
They forget so many things as soon as they cross over. Number one being what it was like to be in a body. A body is painful. We can communicate with them. We can start that communication. It's a matter of taking the time to do so. So for example, if I need some support I've got a move coming up and I need some support from my guides or my dad or my grandfather, I will go into a meditation and invite them to come in, and I will ask for my help. So I don't often wait for my guides to show up. I actually think I have more power than them. I stand by being in a body is more powerful because I can still pick this up. They can't pick this up, or if they do, it takes a lot of effort. So to me, the power actually is in the human. I'm sure when I'm out of a body, I'm gonna be like, no, it's in the spirit. So like I acknowledge there's some bias there. But we can elicit that communication. Now, is every spirit going to show up and be like, yeah, let's have a chat? Absolutely not. I sit in readings, people ask for communication from a past loved one or a guide, and no one comes forward. And I just tell them, doesn't look like they want to participate. Or I see their spirit, they don't want to come into the reading space, and I say they have no interest in communicating today. And so we can start the communication. I think a lot of people, especially in present time, we're so accustomed to waiting to be asked something. Like as a millennial, I'm very accustomed to wait until somebody asks something of me versus jumping right in. And I think that is part of the cultural piece that makes it hard for us to know, like, oh, we can call on our guides, we can call on our unseen support, we can ask questions, we don't have to wait for that prophetic dream, or we don't have to wait till we're daydreaming and suddenly we get this download or insight out of nowhere. We can actually elicit that. And I think it's part of a spiritual practice for some people to encourage that level of communication. I know for myself, at the beginning of the pandemic, this was a bit of a skill I would turn on and off, kind of like you would a light. And here I am almost 5 years later, and I turn it off when I'm going to like Costco or I'm going to a concert or something where it's going to be too much information for me. But in general, it's on all the time for me, so I can receive communication at any time. But it's uncomfortable for people when they're first learning.
Absolutely, absolutely. Cindy, now I want to understand, you are a highly educated person. And then when you talk about these things, how do you rationalize these things, which a lot of people who much lesser educated than you will simply, disdainfully say this is all, not something that I would like to believe in. What is it that that as an educated person still you are ready to understand it and talk about it? What is it that others do not know and they should certainly know about, so that they can actually know what they are missing out on?
The first thing is just belief. I, from a young age, had a lot of information about things I had no business knowing. And I was that kid that parents did not love because I would make comments that were eerily accurate. And there was no reason for me to have information about somebody stepping out on a marriage or a present that was going to be gifted or anything of that nature. So there was a little bit of, I don't want to call it precognition because it wasn't, but there was awarenesses that I had that were quite accurate from a very young age. So when I first got into my training program, it was like somebody was just teaching me how to use some sort of framework to do something I've been doing my entire life. So that belief has been there for over 40 years. So first and foremost, it's a belief. The second thing, when I work with clients who people are always like, oh, you can Google people and you can I love that people think that people are going to have time to do that. I don't have time to look people up and like go down 16 rabbit holes to find their Facebook from when they were 16. Like I'm not going to spend time doing that. But when I offer somebody a reading, especially when I was first training and it was like being traded for like coffee or it was like a parlor trick at a bar, I would get things eerily accurate. And the more I would get things accurate, the quicker and easier it was for me to say, okay, there's something real here. On top of that, I think there's a lot of preconceptions and misnomers around what this work can look like that makes it harder to design really robust research, to be able to go into a room and say, these two people have never met and this person is reading this person's history out of their space, out of thin air. It's really hard to like have the scientific method applied to this. I don't personally think it's impossible. I actually think it's possible, but we have to want to do it and spend the money. For people that just simply don't believe, I'm okay with that. It's okay. You don't have to. I have skeptics sit in front of me that they've never had a reading before and their skepticism is so high, and I'll like make one comment and have no idea whether I'm getting it right or wrong, and they'll just basically be like, nope, I'm done, I want nothing more from you because that was eerily accurate. I've had other skeptics get so excited that somebody got something right that they want more. But I think first and foremost it comes to belief, and then it comes to experience. Like how often are you being validated that this skill is actually a skill? It's not just a gift. It might be part of your identity, but it's something you could work on. And it's interesting because I've been having this conversation a lot lately on whether being psychic is a skill, a gift, or an identity. And I personally think it's all three, but I don't actually think it's that much of a gift. I think anybody can be taught it, but the gift part lends itself to that belief that's kind of foundational to get people to understand that it can actually be a skill.
Right, right. So a lot of you are a professional clairvoyant. You can see the future, and
I can't see the future. I'm very, very clear. I cannot tell the future because I believe in free will. That being said, we do place energy in the future. So for example, we have Halloween in the US in a couple weeks. There are many kids that are excited about their costumes, and there's already energy laid out there. But how it unfolds is a reflection of free will. So I'm very clear, I cannot tell the future.
right. So let's look at it. You can predict things for people.
If I don't, but I could, yes.
Yes.
And the reason I don't, to be clear, is I don't want to determine someone else's destiny. So if I'm doing a reading and they're asking if they should bid on this house or not, I'm looking at the energy and like, what's the likelihood if they do bid on it? What's all the energy around that? And if they don't bid on it, what's all the energy around that? And then I leave it up to them to make the decision. I'm also really clear, like, I'm not going to tell you what to do, which pisses people off, but like, that's okay.
Right. Right. So what do these clients of yours come to you for? Is it for the past or for the future? For past
Everything.
because of the things said or not said to the ones who have crossed over, and also about the past lives themselves. So it's all a huge thing for them to ask for, and you are the one who answers them. How tell us a bit about these client meetings of yours.
Yeah, I have a full range. So I work with fellow practitioners that others might call super woo, where they're in it, they know what they're doing, they know the language, they have very specific questions, they want to understand why this past life is influencing this present time relationship, they want to know about a spirit guide, they want off-planet information, etc. My other end, I am the first time they are sitting in front of somebody like this, and maybe they're coming to me because they were gifted a session. And with the ones that this is brand new, I'm usually just looking at where they are in present time and talking about what I see in their energetic field and asking what areas of life they would like some communication on. So I'm thinking of one client in particular who's male, and I was the first person that ever had any sort of communication for him. And oftentimes we're looking at a couple different layers. One, we're looking at his relationship with his partner and with his child and just ensuring that like those are clear communication things. Two, he is in real estate. So sometimes we're looking at what's on his docket. Why isn't this selling? Where are my clients, etc.? Like, what are the blocks? What are the limits? And then three, eerily, he had asked a question about signs and symbols. And I've never met this person in person. I had no idea. And I said, the sign I keep seeing is very clearly a Celtic knot. And I don't know why, but that's what I keep seeing. And there's no reason, he's not Irish. Like, there was no reason to see that. And he emailed me back and he was like, you have no way of knowing this, but like, I have a tattoo of a Celtic knot and I got it at this age for this reason. And it was like one of those wild moments. That for him gave him a little bit more trust to ask deeper questions. And clients on that end of the spectrum, a lot of the times they're wanting to work through childhood trauma. They're wanting to work relationships in present time. They're wanting to work on manifestation. They're wanting to stop being a people pleaser and understand where like the people pleasing began and how to kind of shift and change it. So I get the full spectrum. And like when I'm working with kids, because I also work with kids, it's a lot of emotional regulation and emotional expression. So it just kind of depends. Like I tell everybody, you can ask about anything with the exception of how is this one thing going to turn out, or when am I going to meet this one person? Because there's no guaranteed outcomes. Like we have free will. So I can tell you, you're going to go meet your partner at Starbucks on the 1st at 2 p.m. and it doesn't happen. And then you're upset. But what did happen is at 12 p.m. on that day, while you were walking around the park, you ran into someone, but you completely dismissed them as a possibility because you were so set on meeting your person at 2 p.m. And that's why I'm really, really hesitant to tell people like how things are going to turn out or what I see is going to turn out. But in general, a lot of my sessions with clients, it's more present time stuff right now. It's a lot of like how do I get this energy out of my space? How do I get out of this pattern? What is this limit and why is it here? So there's a personal development side to it. And then I would say like 15% of it is a little bit more like spirit guides, past lives, off-planet stuff, more woo stuff. And then when I work with families, especially ones that are pregnant or conceiving or trying to become pregnant, we're also looking at, well, what's the dynamic in the family system? What's the dynamic between you and that spirit that you want to give a body to? So it's like a whole range of things. And that's like what I really enjoy about my work is no two sessions are ever the same. And in a single day, I could look at everything I just talked about, like throughout different clients. And honestly, with one or two clients, I probably would look at all of the things I just talked about in a single session because we just bounce around.
Right, right, Cindy. One more thing I want to understand. My whole perception is that there's been rise of spirituality the world over. A
Yeah.
lot of guests that I talk, especially in the Western world, they talk of things that we in India used to talk long back, and the world used to perhaps find it difficult to understand. Now I listen to them and just try to understand their point of view. So many things I already have heard from the way
I'm
I have
sure.
been brought up. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I want to understand the role of spirits into this rise of spirituality. Is it that the time had come for these spirits to inject spirituality into the present day human beings so that they can be fit for the future that is coming in with so many things, good or bad, we don't know? Or is it that humans themselves have woken up to the new realities of the modern world and to the requirements of the future in a planet which is moving towards not so good times? The planet Earth is
Yeah.
facing its difficult time. Tell us about this.
Yes to everything you just said. I will distill it down. First and foremost, I think technology plays a big role. I think with the expansion of the internet and social media platforms, we have more access to information and ideas, and we can say that resonates or that doesn't resonate. I work with a lot of ex-Catholics where they align with certain aspects of the religion, but they don't align with everything. And their ability to see Catholics around the world kind of change how they view it really gave them opportunity to say, okay, I don't have to believe everything. I can kind of cherry pick, for lack of a better word. So I think technology really plays a role because we're getting wider perspectives. Ideally, we're getting wider perspectives. Ideally, we are being open-minded. I live in the US. Obviously, that is not always the case. So first and foremost, I would say technology. And even the 17-year-old that does work for me, he says the same thing. He says his spiritual development began because of YouTube, because of a show on YouTube, so his exposure. Second thing, I think many of us that are on the planet right now tend to be older spirits where we've taken many lifetimes on this planet or others, and we came in this lifetime to kind of help promote that spirituality is an alternative or can be included in religion. I have many clients that are highly religious that are also super spiritual. And in that part, I think it's true to what you just said, where like their spirits helping the planet to be more open, to be more ready. And then finally, I think it's just become more acceptable to be less confined by boxes of ideology and religion and more open. I know in the last 5 years, like when I first started doing my work in a public way, I had to quote unquote come out to two of my academic mentors and say, you know me in this one light, I need you to understand there's this whole other part. And one of them was they were both supportive, but one of them was so supportive and shared her own experiences. And it was a moment of like, okay, the world is ready to have differing views and this level of dissonance. The other is an old school archaeologist. And he sat in his office just absolutely flabbergasted and was like, but you studied archaeology. I'm like, uh-huh. And imagine how cool it is to pick something up and like have a sense of like how it was used or like see pictures in your head that's connected to it. And we sat with it, and over the last 5 years since I shared it with him, he's really been a little bit more open-minded. So I also think our society across the globe has opened up, but in Western culture where it was much more in boxes, I think we've kind of started to break those boxes down. Because you're right, a lot of what I understand and know has ties back to India, has ties back to South America, all these places around the world that are not the US, which is a whole other conversation and fascinating.
Absolutely. There is much to learn and understand about these things from you, Cindy, and I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect with you know more about these things, know more about what you are doing, what services they can avail from you. So, what's the best way for them to do so?
The absolute best way to connect with me is just go to my website, intothenknown.com. There you can set up a consultation. You can find all my social media. My Instagram handle is kind of a mouthful. It's energetic ethnographer. If we can put that in the show notes, that would be awesome, because spelling it out, nobody's going to write it down. But my website, intothenknown.com, has links to everything. It's really in depth about what I do, how I work with people, if I'm the right person for you. And I always tell people, I might not be the right person, but I might know the right person for you. So don't hesitate to reach out and say, I don't know if you're the right person. But in general, my website's the quickest, easiest way to get information.
Right. And let me put it that way. You may not know the right person, but you may certainly know the right spirit for these people.
Yes, there's that too.
Absolutely. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. With this, thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much.